Hey everybody, did you know that trees have antifreeze? They do. It's a substance that was discovered in 1866 by a Russian scientist, and he didn't know exactly what this solvent was at the time. DMSO is a solvent, and when we hear the word solvent, we may think, it sounds like a chemical to be avoided. It's not something that I would want to use medicinally. But trees use DMSO, or dimethyl sulfoxide, as antifreeze, and also to help keep their cells, the cell structure, strong and connected, each one of their cells within the lignin of the tree. And so when this substance was discovered, they didn't really, again, know what this stuff was good for. And it wasn't until the 1960s that research really exploded in regards to DMSO. In the 1950s, there was a scientist that worked for, he was hired by Crown Zellerbach, who is the main producer of DMSO here in the United States. That plant is in Bogalusa, Louisiana, which is about maybe a half hour from where my mother grew up. So Crown Zellerbach hired this scientist to study DMSO, dimethyl sulfoxide, and other tree and plant components to see if there was any use for it. Well, by a lab accident, the scientists found out that DMSO, dimethyl sulfoxide, has the capacity to carry things across the skin barrier into the skin. It was an accident with some dye that he realized this property of DMSO. And then he began to experiment with it, and he found that it would carry antifungals and antibiotics into plant matter. And that was when the interest in research in regards to medicinal properties of DMSO really began to explode. And then in the 1960s, there was a doctor by the name of Stanley Jacobs. He was up in Oregon, Pacific Northwest, and he really popularized, he fought for DMSO to be available to everyone. He was using it on a lot of his patients that had chronic pain issues. So yes, DMSO has analgesic properties, it has antioxidant properties, it has anti-inflammatory properties. And you know, part of the reason I'm doing this, I did a presentation just recently for a group on DMSO, and one of the reasons that I am doing this was mentioned by someone who attended that class. And she said, you know, I was afraid of DMSO. And so I don't want you to be afraid of DMSO. I was also afraid to use DMSO because when you put it undiluted on your skin, it can burn a little bit. But that's almost the only side effect, other than it gives you really bad garlic breath. And that's probably the biggest reason why it's not more widely used today. So in temperatures like we've had around these parts today, trees definitely need antifreeze, and I'm thankful that the Lord created DMSO for the trees, and I'm thankful that we've been able to learn how to extract it from the trees. It's actually a byproduct of the paper making industry, and that's the actual mill in Bogalusa, Louisiana. It's a paper mill, and there's one not too far from where my mother's farm is here in Alabama. So we sometimes are treated with the really strong sulfur smell that comes from the paper mill. I haven't investigated to see if the paper mill here actually produces DMSO, but that would be an interesting thing to find out. So join me on this journey. Let's learn more about DMSO, how it can be used, and hopefully you will begin to incorporate this in your healing journey too, as I have. So Petey the cat has joined me in our new location, and I have my keynote presentation here just so I don't want to forget anything that I wanted to share with you about this amazing stuff. I did bring my bottle of DMSO with me. This is in HDPE plastic. I actually prefer to use it from glass. But HDPE and PET plastic are actually safe to use for DMSO. So let me share a little bit more with you about it, and I'll share also some personal experiences that I've had with it. When you take DMSO, which I mentioned in the first part of the video there, it actually gives your breath a very strong garlic smell. I have a friend who she shared last night on the meeting that we had, she had taken it and gone to work, and her co-worker said that it actually made the whole building stink, and she had to stop using it because it was so bad. It actually is very high in sulfur, and kind of, for me, when I've taken it, it's got a bitter taste. And the MSM, which we'll talk about in just a minute, which is extracted from DMSO, MSM is kind of it almost looks like coarse grained salt, and it's very bitter if you add that to your water and drink some of that stuff. So just like I mentioned that the trees use DMSO as antifreeze and to help maintain their cellular structure, our bodies can use DMSO in a similar fashion, and so that it's very, very beneficial for us. There are about 30,000 published uses of DMSO on PubMed alone, but there's very few approved uses. That back whenever DMSO in the 60s was really kind of becoming popular, the FDA just demonized it as very dangerous and stuff. I personally believe that's because it can't be patented and you know, sold for millions and millions of dollars or whatever. So primarily DMSO is used as a solvent. Whatever you add with it is going straight into the skin. It's going to dissolve it into it. So as I mentioned, there's over 30,000 uses of DMSO, and only a few actually approved uses. And one of the main uses, of course it is a solvent, but one of the main uses is for the treatment of interstitial cystitis. And a lot of the ladies in particular that I work with that have had mold toxicity have suffered with this interstitial cystitis, which is a very painful affliction of the bladder. And so DMSO can be administered directly into the bladder, and it is the treatment of choice for interstitial cystitis. DMSO is also used for stem cells preservation and stuff, and also for organ transplants, because DMSO has a freezing point of 65.3, 65.4 Fahrenheit. And that, you know, whenever they have transplant tissues or what have you, whether it's an eye or a heart or whatever, those need to be kept cool until they're transplanted into the recipient. And if they're just packed in ice or what have you, that can actually damage the tissues. But when DMSO is added, it protects the tissues so that they're not damaged. So it's acting like antifreeze, like the trees use it. So the way that DMSO works is in the body is often referred to, and I'll put these slides up so you can see what I'm talking about. It's often referred to as a new therapeutic principle. The molecule of DMSO is extremely small and is able to cross easily through the cellular wall, and whatever it has dissolved into it is going with it. So as we'll mention a little bit later on in the talk, just be very careful if you use it that your skin is clean. You don't have lotion or soap residues or perfume or what have you, because you could really damage yourself by putting some of those things into your body. So DMSO potentiates whatever it is dissolved in it. And what potentiates mean is it actually makes it stronger or more effective. So you have to be very careful if you're using DMSO with some type of medication. So you want to use caution with that. This is from the DMSO Healing Encyclopedia from page 9. And I mentioned the small molecular size of DMSO. It says here on page 9 of DMSO Healing Encyclopedia, the compound's small molecular size and polar, yet lipophilic or fat-loving nature, allow it to easily penetrate the skin and other cellular membranes. This characteristic is not merely a passive quality, but actively facilitates the transport of other drugs or therapeutic molecules across biological barriers. This property is leveraged in transdermal drug delivery systems where DMSO acts as a carrier, enhancing the absorption of active ingredients through the skin into the systemic circulation. So many people that I know that are into natural remedies use MSM, which is methylsulfonylmethane, and I'll show you that in just a minute, as opposed to DMSO, which is dimethyl sulfoxide. But the MSM has an extra oxygen molecule, and both the MSM and the DMSO have elemental sulfur, and elemental sulfur is actually vital to our bodies. We have to have it. And so it's not really, you know, you have people that maybe have a sulfur drug allergy or something, or they can't eat garlic or onions or what have you. It's not the elemental sulfur per se that they're allergic to, it's the sulfur compounds that they're reacting to. Here you can see a picture, methylsulfonylmethane here on the left, DMSO on the right, and you can see the extra double bonded oxygen with the MSM there, and that little change, that little subtle change, makes a huge difference in the way that the molecule behaves. Although they do have very similar capabilities in the body, DMSO is far superior in its capacities as a solvent and as a carrier. I mentioned earlier back in the 60s how there was a lot of controversy surrounding the use of DMSO, and Dr. Stanley Jacobs was the main proponent. That he was, I guess, the most popular proponent. He was using it for a lot of his patients who had chronic pain, and he really fought with the FDA for this to be approved for common use. And I want to just read with you. There was a 60 Minutes interview, and I think you can find that on Rumble. I don't know if it's on YouTube or not, but it is on Rumble. It's a 60 Minutes interview with Dr. Stanley Jacobs and others who have used DMSO, and also they interviewed Dr. Richard Kraut, who in the 1960s worked with the FDA. This is what Dr. Kraut said about DMSO. He said it's relatively safe, but it may cause hives, headache, nausea, and rashes in some sensitive folk. Well, why would the FDA demonize something that safe? I mean, there's a lot of other drugs that have very severe, and we'll talk about one of them in just a little bit, very severe side effects, and yet they're approved. And so it was a little bit unfair, I guess you might say, the way that DMSO was treated initially. So there's different ways that you can administer DMSO. You can actually give it IV. It's that safe. You can drink it. It's that safe. Of course, you want to pay attention to proper dilution and purity. You can actually nebulize it. You can use it in the eyes. Now, I have never used it in the eyes. It has to be very dilute to use it in the eyes. I myself have not studied it enough to be comfortable using it in the eyes yet, but I would definitely use it around the eyes. And then intravesical is within the bladder, and we talked about that with the interstitial cystitis. And then you can actually give it as an injection right into the muscle. Excuse me. But with all of these methods of administration, according to Dr. Roy Richards, his actual name is Herb Richards, but they call him Roy, R-O-I. He has a book on DMSO, and I'll try to show you those at later on in the video. He says disseminating via needle or IV is no more effective at getting DMSO into the bloodstream than applying to the skin topically or ingesting or swallowing it. A transdermal application or rubbing a DMSO solution onto the skin delivers the same concentration of DMSO to the bloodstream in almost the same amount of time as injecting it straight into the bloodstream. That is an amazing and powerful property that you, in the comfort of your own home, can administer this simple remedy, and it's every bit as powerful as taking it IV in some clinic somewhere. It's amazing. Same man, Dr. Roy Richards, said a study performed by the Emory University School of Medicine concluded that DMSO was a more powerful painkiller compared to morphine, and that the pain-killing effects of DMSO lasted up to 7 hours, more than 3 times longer than morphine's 2-hour relief. That's incredible, the kind of pain relief that you can get with DMSO. And if you add it, if you infuse, and I have a friend, Edwin Chung, up in it, he's with, his company is Humble Herbals. He is actually extracting herbs using DMSO and has had phenomenal results because of that way of administration. I'll put a link to Edwin's products that he has available in the description below the video. So DMSO has very few precautions, but morphine, not so. We just talked about morphine for pain. It really only lasts about 2 hours as opposed to DMSO's 7 hours of relief. Morphine also depresses the respirations. It basically locks up the GI tract, so there's severe constipation. Most of the patients that I've ever worked with that in my nursing career that had been on hospice were given morphine for comfort measures. Most of them died from morphine overdose. Think about that. Okay, we mentioned Dr. Stanley Jacob back in the 60s. He was the one who fought for the right for people to use DMSO. And Richard Broben conducted human DMSO trials in 1967 and 68. And he concluded that after exposing a test group of humans to 30 times the recommended quantities of DMSO, which would be about a half a cup of DMSO per day, he did that for 90 days, and he had no adverse reaction in any of the people, any of the subjects. The recommended daily dose of DMSO is 1 to 2 tablespoons per day. So half a cup is quite a bit more. So it's very safe to use DMSO. Let me just give you a short list of a few uses of DMSO, and really you need to get a book and study, because there's so many different ways you can use it, so many different ailments you can use it for. But fever blisters and shingles, I actually had a friend who had shingles and the pain was severe, and she put the DMSO on it, and it was about the only thing that brought any relief. Cuts and burns, pain relief. It does not mask pain, but it helps to block the pain signals, and it aids in healing. Of course, we mentioned interstitial cystitis. Scar tissue, it's a very powerful and gentle wound healer and helps to actually avoid scar tissue. Brain health and strokes, you can apply it right to the head of someone who's having a stroke or give it internally, and it's very helpful with that. It has diuretic properties. It blocks nerve conduction causing pain and thus relieves nerve pain, reduces inflammation. It's very powerful at that. Improves blood supply to a wounded area, so it's vasodilating. Stimulates healing, anti-aging, helps to prevent wrinkles, strengthens connective tissues. Use that along with vitamin C, and your skin will be much more youthful in appearance. It kills bacterial, virus, fungus, candida, including vaginal candida, and I had someone who had a severe and chronic case of bacterial vaginosis, and with 2 applications of DMSO mixed with just a little bit of silver solution, her problem was solved. It was gone. And of course we used a syringe and put that right up into her vagina, and it just took away the BV immediately. It's DMSO is an antioxidant, so it's a free radical scavenger. It chelates heavy metals, including aluminum, cadmium, mercury, arsenic, and nickel, and it eliminates, this is the beauty of it, it eliminates those heavy metals through the urine and the sweat, which takes a huge load off the liver. Everyone's liver is truly hammered these days with all the toxins we're exposed to. DMSO crosses the blood-brain barrier, so it aids in brain detox. It potentiates or strengthens the herbs or other medications that it's combined with. So again, you have to be very careful and educate yourself before you start using it in that way. It's radioprotective, so if you're having to have some type of x-ray or scan or what have you, or you're going through the x-ray machine at the airport, taking a little bit of DMSO, especially when combined with vitamin C, because vitamin C is also radioprotective. It can really protect your cells from any damage from the radiation. DMSO increases platelet production, and it also dissolves clotting. It is said to reverse tinnitus. I'm not sure there, I'd have to look it up, but I'm not sure if you would take that internally or like rub it behind the ear. Probably both would be useful, but I'm not sure which would be the best for that. Many people today are proponents of using the CBD oil, and there's a lot of people who are opposed to that. The CBD uses the endocannabinoid system in our bodies, and there's an essential oil called copaiba that also uses that same endocannabinoid system. If you combine copaiba with DMSO, it's a powerful pain relieving effect, and you don't have to use that CBD. So, excuse me, if you use DMSO on your skin undiluted, which undiluted is like 99.9% pure, because DMSO is a very water-hungry molecule, it can cause it pulls the moisture out of your skin and can cause your skin to have kind of a leathery appearance, and it's not permanent, that's easily reversed. But if you dilute the DMSO with a little water first, like maybe make it an 80%, you'd use 80% DMSO and 20% water, then, and that heats up, by the way, when you combine those, you'll have a heating reaction. Then it won't cause that leathery appearance. You can also use aloe vera or something like that, distilled water or aloe vera, and that will help it not to make your skin so leathery. DMSO also absorbs a little bit better if you dilute it with a little bit of water. If you have very sensitive skin, and I recommend that you kind of test a small area of your skin. People tend to be more sensitive from the waist up for some reason than from the waist down. But test a small area, use the proper dilution, and we'll talk about dilutions more in just a minute. But you should be fine. But if you still have a problem with burning, then you can apply a thin layer of olive oil on your skin, and that can help to eliminate the burning. So you can dilute it again with aloe vera, distilled water, colloidal silver, or silver water. And typical dilutions are anywhere between 50 and 90%, depending on where you're going to use it. There's other popular dilution rates as well. Of course, I mentioned earlier around the eyes, you need to really, really be cautious and dilute it down. I mentioned also earlier that the only safe plastics to put it in that I know of are the PET and HDPE plastics. Otherwise, use glass. It's not recommended that you mix it in any type of metal or ceramic or other plastic besides this. And in fact, I think if you use PVC, polyvinyl chloride or something like that, anyway, that actually will melt if you put DMSO in it. So the research that I found said that DMSO properly stored has a shelf life of about 3 years. That, you know, that's kind of a technicality, because I have a bottle of DMSO similar to the one that I just showed you a while ago that I've had. This is in the HDPE bottle, and I've had it for a long time. And this one actually is not as good because it's only partially frozen. It's probably mid-40s out here, and there's still a little bit of water. So this one would probably be only like 90 or 80% pure. So it's already dilute. You could easily use this straight on your skin without having to add any water. But 99.99999% pure DMSO would be frozen solid out here. I mean, you could still squish it a little bit, but it would be frozen. Mine that I have in my other bottle, I have 2 bottles like this. I've probably had it for, I know I've had it over 6 years. I don't know exactly how long. This one I haven't had as long, but it's been opened and used more. The other bottle, 6 years, it freezes right up and it still gives the kind of warming, burning sensation. It still smells strong. I still get pain relief from it when I use it, like on an achy back or knee or whatever. So I don't know if the 3 years is entirely accurate, but you know, you just want to test your product before you use it. The way, I gotta shift off, my foot's going to sleep here. The way that you test the purity of your product is this freezing. You know, I just showed you that mine is not completely frozen, so I know that it's not completely pure. Even though it says 99.9% pure on there, and it probably was when I bought it, because it's been left open for a little bit while we were using it or what have you, then it's absorbed some water from the air. We have very humid conditions here in Alabama, and so it's going to easily absorb some water, so it's not entirely pure. But if you put your DMSO in the refrigerator and it freezes within 15 minutes, it's probably about 99% pure. But if it has a little water in it like mine, you're probably looking at more like 90% or less. Okay, some cautions. We mentioned quite a bit about skin sensitivity. DMSO will not harm internal organs when used at proper doses. And I shared with you that study that was done where 30 times the recommended daily dose was given for a period of 3 months, and there was no damage to anyone's internal organs. I don't know how many people were in that study, but I could probably find it if I dug deep enough. And again, make sure that your skin is clean. No nail polish, no perfume, no lotion, no soap residues. Make sure your skin is clean if you're going to use DMSO topically, because whatever is on your skin, maybe you've just put out some rat poison or just pumped gas in your car and splashed a drop or two, that is going into your skin when you use DMSO if you don't clean that off. And then there's not been enough research done for pregnancy and nursing, so just across the board, I don't use it for people who are in that condition. We mentioned earlier about the study that was done, and also about folks being truly allergic to sulfur is kind of questionable, because sulfur is actually needed in our bodies, and it's probably a sulfur compound that people are allergic to. In his book, DMSO for Humans, I believe is the title. I'll show you those in just a little bit. Dr. Roy Richards, I think, he's 95 years old. He just wrote his book not too long ago, and I just watched an interview between him and I forget the doctor's name, but he has a really nice article online. You can find that interview on Rumble. But he has used DMSO for well over 30 years on almost a daily basis. And he says that the smell on your breath of garlic with the DMSO is a sign of detoxification. And once your body gets cleaned up and your health improves, that smell will go away even if you're using it on a daily basis. So that's encouraging. So key takeaways from everything we've discussed so far: use the proper dilution. Okay, if you're going to use it in your eyes, you're definitely not going to use 50, 60, 70, 80, 90%. You're going to dilute it way down. Make sure your skin is clean. Test for sensitivity first. Make sure that you use a good, pure pharmaceutical grade. And you can, because DMSO is actually a horse liniment, and you can find it in most farm and feed stores as a horse liniment. And it's a lot of times even in this white bottle like I just showed you. And then remember also that there's something called biochemical individuality. Just because I don't have a problem using DMSO doesn't mean that you won't. So that's why we want to test a small area first. And then finally, in closing, we don't believe in silver bullets. We don't believe that any one remedy even though DMSO has a multitude of uses and applications, I don't believe it's a silver bullet. I believe that we need to pay attention to our diet and our lifestyle, the laws of health that God wrote in our very being with His own finger when He created us. And so be careful with what you eat. Make sure that you get a balanced diet. Make sure you keep your bowels open. You're drinking plenty of water. You're getting exercise and sunlight and fresh air and all those things. And then that is going to enhance the properties of DMSO and other natural remedies. So I'll show you some books here in just a little bit when we get back inside. So here's the books that I wanted to show you that I have. I quoted from the one by Dr. Herb or Roy Richards, DMSO, dimethyl sulfoxide for humans. This is, I don't agree with his philosophy of life. I think he's about as new age as they come, but he did a really good job on the DMSO book. And then Amanda Vollmer, she's in Canada. She has one, and there's a lot of videos by her on Rumble on DMSO. She's also using it in herbal extracts like my friend Edwin is. And then probably my most comprehensive, well, I don't know. I have one by Dr. Walker. I can't remember his first name, but I couldn't find the book. A lot of our stuff is packed, so I couldn't find it. But I just recently got this one, and boy, does it have a lot of information in it. It's the DMSO Handbook, A New Paradigm in Healthcare by Hartmut Fisher. So you can find that. I got it off of Amazon, I think. It's on Amazon and eBay. So these are some resources that you can get, and I hope that this video was helpful, and I hope that you will be encouraged to use DMSO and not be afraid of it. It's really, if you use the proper dilution, you use the proper administration, you make sure your skin is clean, you make sure that you test for sensitivities and stuff, you should be fine using DMSO. But again, I have to give the disclaimer that you use it at your own discretion. This video is only for educational purposes. So, and I have not been approved by the FDA. And we'll see you on the next video.